Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of No Running in the Corridors, the Rebel podcast that aims to rewrite the school rulebook, one regulation at a time. We have got a cracking episode for you this week on what is probably one of the most perennially divisive edu topics out there. The guests are brilliant, conversation is fascinating, and amazingly, I think we even come up with a potential solution or two. So I really, really want to share it with you all. But before I do, I also want to apologise for the fact that, thanks to some sort of glitch in the secret meeting room on the day we were recording, the sound, I've got to say, is not up to our usual super sparkly standard. I do hope that won't prove too much of a distraction. Our genius sound wizard, Arnaud, has done his absolute best to smooth things out, and I promise normal service will have been resumed for the next episode. And as I say, the content is still absolutely worth your time, I promise. So go on, let's go for it.
I mean, if you're going to have the rules and you're going to have zero tolerance, that's great. But we're also going to apply that rule to the teachers. Okay, you can take your kids out of school, but be prepared for your teacher to also take the time out of school. How do you like them apples?
My name is Helen Mully, and joining me today on No Running in the Corridors are two guests with very different, and I'm going to say not necessarily mainstream relationships to the rule we're discussing. From the talk face, or perhaps I should say from the screen face, we have Ryan Lockett, head teacher of TLC Live's online school. Hello, Ryan.
Hello, Helen.
And joining us as well is Mr. Shane Kirk, a parent who has a son in year 11. Hello, Shane.
Hello, Helen. Hello, Ryan. Thank you for having me.
You are very welcome. Okay, so in just a moment, I will reveal the rule that's on the table. But first, let's have a quick warm-up. So, before we get into the thorny stuff, I want to ask each of you, are you instinctively a rule follower or a rule breaker? And I am going to go for you first, Ryan.
I think instinctively, being a teacher and PE by trade, rules are really important. I think they're there to set expectations, to set standards, and important to follow. Having said that, I do think in many, many cases, contextual judgment is something which you may hear me say quite a lot today, because I think it's important to understand the situation and when to be able to bend the rules potentially for the better outcome. For example, there might be we had a year 11 boy when I was in mainstream school. Coming to school was a big problem. Managed to get him into school. He would join the back of the class, but he wanted to keep his coat on. Now, some teachers was having none of that and would send him outside, whereas you've got the contextual side of things, obviously, is that having him in the class is the best thing all round. So I would say a bit of a rule follower, but there's always room for a little bit of contextual judgment within those.
A bit of judicial rule bending, shall we say. Okay, how about you, Shane? What's your take on the rules issue?
It's a very similar take, but along with myself, I think everyone would describe themselves as rule followers until that rule doesn't suit them. The work with the coat in the classroom is interesting. I'm absolutely furious at people who cross the road 10 yards up from a perfectly serviceable pedestrian crossing, because that's what we're supposed to do. That's the rule. Until, of course, I'm crossing the road and I don't mind waiting until all the cars are going past, because I'd rather not, press the button and hold everyone up. I'm insistent that other people follow that rule. But obviously, I'm better than them, so I can make that decision for myself, because I'm the sort of person that can decide things rationally and sensibly.
Okay, I think we've both set our stalls out here, and we are definitely not heading for a black and white conversation, which is excellent because that's not what we want. So let me introduce the rule that we're going to put under the microscope this episode, and it is no holidays in term time. It's a controversial one. It provokes more debate and discussion inside and outside of the classroom than almost any other. But it's there and it has stuck. And looking at it from the obvious perspective, it seems pretty basic, pretty clear. I mean, children are only expected to be in school for 38, 39 weeks a year. I mean, that's a lot of weeks left over for a jaunt to Marbella or rain dodging in Devon or whatever floats your boat. But clearly, it's more complicated than that. So let's see where each of you is starting from. Brian, as a head teacher, this rule has got to make sense to you, right? You want the children in front of you, otherwise you can't teach them.
Yes, I believe that having consistent and fair rules, I'll touch upon that again, is clear. However, the parent side of me has seen a different side of that. Just alone in the school that my boys go to, the rule is a zero tolerance. Zero tolerance, students have to be in school, absolutely fine. I'm okay with that. School 5 miles down the road have a different view on it, and therefore they've kind of got that contextual judgment in terms of, yeah, absolutely fine. You can take students out of school. From my perspective as an educator, you want students in front of you. You want them to be happy. You want them to be learning. You want them to be in school. For many, many students, as you're aware, school is their safe space as well. So there's a safeguarding element to that as well. However, as the parent side of things, I think there's a lot of benefits to be had from holidays. And for many, which I'm sure we'll touch upon in a bit, but for many reasons that taking holidays in holiday time is just unmanageable, whether that's through cost or through logistics as well. So it's kind of, I've got 3 different heads-on views on this, all of which I think there's a room for this discussion, certainly.
Okay, so moving to you then, Shane, from the parent's perspective, how does the no holidays in term time rule work for you?
As a rule follower, that's fine for me. So I know where I stand. There's no holidays in term time. Once you've got that rule there, you know if you're sticking to it or you're breaking it. And you, as a parent, exercise your right to choose whether you're a rule follower or a rule breaker. Now, in terms of what your decision is on that, for instance, my son is now in his second year of doing his O-levels, and I would not countenance at all taking holidays in term time. It's too important. If you'd have asked me 3 years ago whether I could save £1,000 and pay a £240 fine, I may have had a very different answer on that, which is coming back to you are a rule follower right up until the time that rule doesn't make sense to you. Not being a teacher, however, I can empathise with how come there are 5 children out of my class of 30 missing. I'm going to have to catch up with those children. And then you've got the opportunity to say, if you want to take your children out of school in the 2 years they're doing O-levels, they and you get everything you deserve.
Yeah, exactly. Now, I'm just going to leap in here and explain to our younger listeners, and that does include most of the teaching profession, that when Mr. Kirk talks about second year of doing O-levels, he means year 11 and about to take his GCSEs. So you can just clarify that for you. Ryan, is there something you wanted to come in on that?
I was just going to say that a view from a fellow teacher who I've heard before, their stance was, I can't take holiday in school time. Why should students be able to? My parent response to that would be, you have 13 weeks holiday, which is interesting. I think it's a discussion in itself. But yeah, I know certain views from teachers may be just that I can't, I'm not allowed to, so students shouldn't be allowed to either. Not my view.
They might they might say that. I've also heard parents say, well, Mrs. X has a nose ring, so why on earth can't my teenage daughter have a nose ring? So, students and teachers have different rules. That's the thing. Shane, what did you want to say?
Well, talking on that point, or sort of going further into that point, if you're going to have the rules and you're going to have zero tolerance, that's great. Or I may be leaping further ahead in the conversation. You say, yeah, you can take your kids out of school, but we're also going to apply that rule to the teachers. So you are insistent that teachers are there from first day of term to the last day of term. Why do I have to take the day off because of inset days? Okay, you can take your kids out of school, but be prepared for your teacher to also take the time out of school. How do you like them, Apple?
I did say we were the Rebel podcast. This is shaping up well. So, okay, let's dig into the details a bit more, because this isn't really a conversation about attendance in the broader sense. There are many, many different reasons why a child might not be in school, a lot of them very valid, and a lot of them troubling and needing a lot of support. I think it's generally thought that holidays fall into a different category, and we can talk a bit about whether we agree with that or not. The fact is there are real issues around attendance in schools, and that's the reason why the government is leaning on schools to get those numbers up. And of course, one of the low-hanging fruit, I guess, when it comes to raising attendance is to penalise parents who are taking children out for what is perceived as a bit of a jolly. You know, it's certainly a lot easier to tackle that than to tackle with a persistent school refuser with profound anxiety or something like that. And we know that there is that correlation between attendance and outcomes. If children aren't in the classroom, teachers can't do what they do best, which is teach them. So, Ryan, in your setting, do you see that difference between attendance generally and family holidays during term time particularly?
With our online school, well, actually, first of all, like I said, the point is that I want to make first of all is that the current attendance situation is not working. It's not working.
Sure.
So why not flip it and try to put a positive sign on it? Positive in terms of, and I'll get to it a bit later. One of the points that I was going to raise was, why not have it if your attendance is above 95%, for example? Yes, we'll consider your holiday within term time. Why not try something different? Would be my original point on that. What I'd say about because linked to our school, where we don't have external pressures on attendance, of course, we want students in lessons, we want them learning, we want the best outcomes possible for that student. Every student's different, as we know that already, but lots of students that come to us have had very turbulent journeys in education. We've had a young person in our school that didn't attend school, mainstream school, for 2 years, would not attend. They go through the process, okay, try another school, try this special provision. It didn't work, and they missed out on 2 years of education. Come to us, first year, their attendance was 60%. In the schemes of mainstream school, that's horrendous, poor attendance. In schemes of this young person, it's fantastic. Parents, local authority, and us are all over the moon that this student has started to re-engage with education and is now in a really good position to kick on this year and look at GCSEs next year. So we're different because we don't get external pressures on attendance. We obviously want students to be in lessons, but equally, that balance with parents and that relationship with parents is different. I think with mainstream schools, it can be quite confrontational in times with threatening letters and things going through. It's different for us in our online setting, and it seems to be working. There was the relationships with parents are really positive. We're flexible, but obviously it's because we're not getting external pressures on students have to be in lessons. But these young people are re-engaging in education and doing really, really well for them, for their needs, their journey.
Excellent. And Shane, are there any circumstances under which you would be happy for your son to have time out of school during term time? Not that you would be happy, but you'd compromise the fact that he's in his GCSE year because this is more important.
I think the GCSE year is hugely important. As I say, I would be very reluctant to compromise on that. And in IRL, in real life, we have been offered an all expenses paid holiday because we have some extraordinarily generous relatives, but have specified that this can't be until at least the third week in July because we know that he's going to be having exams. And we've had this conversation and the response was, but it's really expensive after then. We said, we know it's expensive and we know why it's expensive, but this is very much a watershed moment in my son's life because I happen to agree that people look at exam results as a measure. I'm not the sort of parent that looks at them and goes, exams don't matter, I didn't get any, and look, I run my own business and I'm doing terribly well, which is a viewpoint that you may well take it and say, I'm smarter than the average bear because look at me, I've saved myself £1,000 over the course of 2 weeks and the resort was much quieter. And I understand that point of view. It's not one that I hold or agree with. On the other hand, if, in the previous 2-3 years, where they've already been having discussions in which DVD they're going to be watching in the last week before the holidays, oh yeah, whip them out straight away.
Okay, and there you go. And that is you assessing whether the rule works for you at a particular point in time, as you started saying. But that does also ease us into what I see as the next stage of the conversation, which is that eternal equity question. In many ways, your son, Shane, and your children, Ryan, privileged. They're privileged in the sense that they have parents who do think about things in that way. They have parents who consider the impact of the rule breaking and make a decision that they have decided is best for everyone. There are some kids whose circumstances are different, and it's not necessarily that the parents just thinking, well, not having exams worked for me. I run a multi-million-pound business or whatever. It might be that they've have parents who had really poor education experiences themselves. They don't understand the impact, or also, they know the value of spending a week as a family somewhere away from what might be a chaotic and difficult family home, and they literally cannot afford it any other time of year. So I suppose what would be good to think about is whether there is anything that the system could do to make things more equitable for families when it comes to accessing that kind of family experience. Shane?
I mean, having considered this, it might be a sort of radical solution, because I was looking at how many weeks holiday there are.
Yeah.
And on the surface, you'd think, well, there's so much time, they're hardly ever there, teachers and children. But we don't have to send our children to Kent to go hot picking anymore. We don't have to have them out, bailing things. If there is, say, 16 weeks holiday, why is most of that in July and August? Why they're 2 weeks for a half term or 3 weeks at the end of a term for the first 2, and then the summer is squeezed down slightly? Overall, it's the same amount of holiday, but it's spread across more of the year. So there would be more variation. Not everyone is, as Europe did, closing down for August and all going to the coast. And I don't know whether there are educators having this discussion in France and saying, do you know what? Should we not all go on holiday at the same time? Or why term times all fixed in the same cycle? Why don't schools in East Anglia go from the first week in May to the last week of June, while schools in Yorkshire go from the first week in April to the last week in May?
I'm just going to say, Shane, have you ever tried to organise a massive clan gathering family holiday where the generations gather together in a villa somewhere or a holiday cottage somewhere for a week? I mean, chaos would ensue.
This is another point which is going back. We're not just talking about a single child, which I am. The exams being in July means that if you have younger children still at primary school, they are going to be watching Ratatouille in the last week of term, because your older child is going to have to stay in school until that's all finished. And the answer to your question is yes. I've been often enormously expensive gathering of the clans, which we have pushed back until after the schools are finished.
I can hear that's playing on your mind a little one. Ryan, what do you think about the actual structure of the school year? Might it help if we had a rethink about that rather than whether or not you take a holiday during term time?
Yeah, I think 2 weeks off across all half terms makes perfect sense. The 6 weeks is such a long time. However, if we're kind of relating it back to what really is the nuts and bolts of it is that parents take their children out of school in most cases, from my experience, because it's cheaper.
Yeah.
Because it's cheaper. I, guilty, took my boys out. He was only in reception, I might add. He was 5 years old in reception. Took him out because for the sake of a month, as Shane, I'm sure you're aware, it saved me £2,000. And this was go to Spain for 2 weeks. I then got an email, we got a letter to say we're being fined because I've failed to let my child attend school regularly. His attendance was 98.6%. I got a letter to say I've failed as a parent, which was, it was debatable at that point, I think. However, I think it's really difficult. And actually, I've just had a conversation with my mum about this because I said I was coming to speak to you today. And so going back to do I think spreading the holidays over the year better? Yes, I think that's a good idea because 6 weeks is such a long time. I don't think it would stop this issue of parents taking schools out, because ultimately, in most cases, again, from my experience as a parent and as an educator, is that parents will do it regardless to save half the price of the holiday in many cases.
For sure. I want us to think a little bit about, I'm going to call it there's a kind of a snobbery around holidays during term time. And when this discussion comes up, I mean, you'll have had this, Ryan, as a every teacher, head teacher will have had the parent who writes them a letter saying, look, I know you don't normally authorise holidays in term time, but this is a cultural extravaganza. We have the opportunity to visit volcanoes, see museums. He'll be learning. It'll be massively educational. He's going to use 3 modern foreign languages and all of the above. And in some circles of discussion, that kind of holiday is seen differently from an all-inclusive in Spain where you're going to sit by the pool for 2 weeks, and just relax and splash about. Ryan, do you think there is a difference between those two types? Do you think one is more worthy of consideration for leave during term time than the other?
Such a good question. And then equally, you could say, regardless, is the well-being of the student just as important, whether it's a week to get away, to swim in the pool. Let's not take away that swimming in a pool is physical activity, a life skill, and something that is, not a day-to-day, in certainly not in current England when it's not too warm. I think all should be considered. Again, that comes down to whether you're that rule follower or rule breaker in the cases. And I would certainly consider, so my view is, I think that if there was a rule potentially that head teachers could make a decision based on their current attendance, why not flip it and have it as a benefit or as a reward almost? Yes, your child has attended over 95% of the year. I'm going to grant you that holiday. Why not look at something like that to try to change the perspective from battling with schools, knowing some may not. I know that opens the door to inconsistencies. However, I think what's going on at the moment is not working. Why not try to flip it to be almost like, your attendance has been fantastic this year. Why not? And it just might get those students that are unsure, those parents unsure, getting their children in every morning to go, come on, look, if we get in, then we can have our holiday later in the year, maybe.
It risks being just a little bit perverse, offering time off as an incentive for attendance.
Yes, but then equally, I've been in schools where some students may have a day off every other week, and because they're poorly or because they're not, and then there's other students that attend every week. Why not reward their attendance? Why not give a bit of an incentive? I think it's definitely, there could be a discussion around it.
Yeah, sure. Shane, what do you think? Do you think some holidays are more equal than others?
I think, it's a really good point that Ryan makes. It's not always about going to look at a volcano or an aqueduct. Sometimes it is just sitting in the sun quietly reading a book can be as valuable for that person, that human being that we're talking about. And once you go down that route, there is also who decides what's a worthy holiday or not.
Yeah.
Within that framework, you start putting rules in to say, if you can come back and write an essay on what I did on my holidays, you can go. But some children aren't good at essays. Some do need the break to go away and recharge and redo their batteries. The time off for good behaviour, I think, is a really interesting thing, because there is a thing, and many of your listeners may be aware of this, there is a thing that employers use called the Bradford factor.
I'm not familiar with this.
That is a calculation which involves the number of days you have off work on this occasion, the frequency, the duration, and it all goes into a formula to say, because people are terrified, they'll go into work if they've got flu or they've broken a leg. So, for example, if you break your leg, you have a month off. This will not tip you over the edge of your Bradford factor. If, for instance, you have every second Friday off, this will trigger the formula and someone will look into it. It's not foolproof. A lot of companies use it, but that is certainly, I think, a way of saying your attendance has been great. And the reason I know it works is because one of the managers I used to work with used to be able to predict accurately when one of his workers would not show up on a Monday, because he'd say, we've explained it's completely open. You can check the formulas, and an individual certainly would be so good at working out what their Bradford factor was that the moment it dropped below the threshold, they wouldn't be into work. Now, obviously, you run the risk of having parents who are up on it enough to work that out. But as an overall framework, I think that works really well. I think it is counterintuitive to say you've been here 98% of the time, you can have a week off. But equally, I've had those letters come back from school when my son's been sent home ill and told not to come back until he's better. And then a week later, a letter arrives saying your attendance is down to 95%. That's a different subject, I guess. We're talking about holidays.
It is, but it does all feed into the same thing. And it does feed into the fact that for schools in the mainstream, as Ryan's already pointed out, attendance becomes a numbers game. The accountability measures just look at that top line figure. So you get it up whatever way you can. Finally, before I ask you to cast your verdict, because I will be doing that, I wonder if we could just have a little think about trust, because we know that the best systems have strong relationships within them and underpinning them, and there has to be a certain element of trust in there. Ryan, what do you think, making a rule about whether a family can take their own child out of school and make the decision to take them on holiday, thereby voluntarily giving up the education to which they're entitled. If a school makes a rule saying that the parent cannot do that, what does it say about how far school trusts those parents, and does that matter?
I think it comes down to, ultimately, like you mentioned, schools and the number game. They're going to want children in regardless. Parents are going to want what is best for their family. And I think whether that means saving a couple of pounds and or taking a holiday when a child needs it, it's a really tricky one. And this is where I've had many conversations over the past year with parents that are sick to death, almost in breaking point of all these threatening letters from schools about their attendance. Yeah. And I know we're looking at something different, but this is where, when they come to us as the online school, we kind of say, look, again, we haven't got external pressures, but if you want to take an afternoon because you as the parent think your child needs a break, they need a break, go for coffee, go for a walk, just let us know so we know whether to expect your child or not. I'm okay with that, because I know that therefore the next day the student will be in the class and be happy to learn, because they've had that break when the parent has decided that the child needs it, or the child has told the parent or carer that that's needed. I think mainstream schools, they're stuck, they're bound by figures, and certainly with attendance, and that's on that individual basis that I'm happy. And attendance has certainly grown and improved because parents feel that they're in control of their child's relationship and education.
And there is that thing, isn't it, that we all learn during, and I'm going to mention the L word, during the lockdown period, which is in a mainstream school setting, you're there from 8:45 to 3:30 or whatever the time is, but the actual time for learning within those hours is really quite small. Once you take out registration, moving between classrooms, break time, lunchtime, resettling after every single break, you can compress the actual time they're spent learning into much less than a full day, I guess, in terms of catching up. Shane, what do you think about the importance of trust between schools and families?
I think it's very much, I've spent most of my time nodding when Ryan's speaking and saying, I know, right? I know. It is sometimes difficult to say, do you know what? Every parent's doing everything right all the time and the best for their child, because I think we all know that that's not a universal thing.
Sure.
And it's interesting that you made a point of lockdown, in that I think that opened a lot of people's eyes to what actually goes into education. Once folk had to educate their own children, I think a lot of parents woke up and realised, they don't just tip their children off at the school gate and pick them up later and they've been, colouring in all day. There's a lot more to it than that. I think that opened up quite a lot of people's perceptions as to the importance of teaching. And I think this has been going on over time. It changed school attendance from an obligation to a transaction.
Right.
I think previously we, as parents, knew that our children were supposed to be in school. And the holidays is not a new thing. I think it's been more pronounced over the last 5-10 years. And it's become a transaction. And it's, we need your children to be in school. And sometimes the parents' response is, for what? What's in it for me? What's my deal?
Yeah.
It's not an answer, but I think it's certainly affecting the way that people look at, does my child need to be in school? And I think certainly since lockdown, more parents have empathy with what their children are possibly going through and saying, do you know what? There is a lot of pressure. There is a lot of stress involved. I can't deal with it. I don't see how you're going to. Let's go out for a week.
Yeah.
And I know that previously I said, well, that's a good thing. But then we get back to the trust thing of who we're judging on. You are a responsible parent. You know what's best for your child. You are not a responsible parent. That child needs to be here with me.
Exactly. If you start saying that certain swathes of parents are allowed to make decisions that other swathes of parents aren't, I think you're going down at the very least, a slightly unfootsure path. So I am going to wrap this up, but before I do, I'm afraid it is a clear format point that you have to pass your verdict on the rule in question. And so I'm going to ask each of you in turn to decide whether no holidays in term time is a rule that we keep as it is, that we scrap altogether, or that we give a serious rethink. And I am going to you first, Shane, on this. As from the parental perspective, what do we think?
I think we need to at least try a rethink, because I think we've established it's not working at the moment.
Yeah.
We can keep it as is and issue all the fines we like, but then we're still going to be having this conversation.
Sure.
In 5 years. I think we need to look at it. Just recently, I think the head of Ofsted, in the Times, so therefore true, was looking at why we're doing exams in July when it's hot and everyone's bothered. So if they are prepared to look at when exams are timed, let's just roll out the whole, okay, exams are going to be in March, they're going to be over by April. Everyone's family can go away together in May, or wait until August. I think we need to get the big virtual whiteboard, put one of those big grids up, plus, minus, advantages, disadvantages, stresses, and come back at the end and say, do you know what? Should we try this? Let's try it in the Isle of Wight and see if it works.
Absolutely. Okay, Ryan, what's your verdict?
Yes. I think
That's not a yes question. There were three options there.
Yes, there should be. I agree with Shane. Brings up another interesting point about exams. Never thought about that one before. That is interesting. Yes, there should certainly be consideration around it with clear expectations, rules, and standards tied to that.
Excellent. Shane, one more point.
Once you put those new rules in, though, we've got to stick to them.
Certainly for the trial period in the Isle of Wight. That's right.
Absolutely. And on that bombshell, Thank you so much, Ryan and Shane, for giving us your time and sharing your expertise and your experience. It's been a really illuminating conversation, lots to think about. So thank you both for that. And thank you to everyone who's been listening. I'll be back soon with another episode, putting another rule under the microscope. So do subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and spread the word. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell strangers you meet on the street. Plus, if there's a rule that's been getting under your skin recently and you think it can use some deeper investigation, we are here to help. Why not get in touch with us and let us know about it? The email address is in the episode notes. Thank you again. And until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and remember, no running in the corridors.